The Ukraine, a country bridging East and West in the center of East Europe. But is it any good to start your business there today? Let's talk about it now! Hi, I'm Oliver and welcome back to the channel Ask Me Startup, where we talk about startups, small businesses and the world that surrounds them. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and pushing the notification bell so YouTube lets you know whenever I'm uploading new content. If you're into business, if you have a small business, if you plan to start a business, please feel free to download my free startup checklist, link in the description below. Okay, today's topic has been asked by many of my viewers to do a video about. It is the Ukraine. Is it any good to start your business there today? Now, as always in this series, we take a look on the facts about the country first. So the Ukraine is a Central East European country, neighboring countries like Russia, but also Poland, with its capital, Kiev. There are roughly 44 million inhabitants, and they all do a GDP PPP per capita of $13,000 US. The lowest amount I have reported in any of my videos so far. Now, the Ukraine isn't part of the EU, but it's trying to go there. However, the society itself is kind of mixed. So they want to get closer to Russia or they want to get closer to the EU, and this seems to be a 50-50 split. As of today, as of the recording of this video, unfortunately, the Ukraine is under a massive threat of a war, and keep fingers crossed that everything stays peacefully forever. So the first thing we would like to understand if we talk about Ukraine is how entrepreneurial are the Ukrainians? Because in one way or the other, that defines the frame set that we're working in. And if you look at the numbers, I have to tell you that the Ukrainians are not more or less entrepreneurial than, let's say, Poland or any of the other Eastern European countries. That is interesting because there is a big hype going on about the ecosystem of startups in the Ukraine. Why is that? So if you look at the startup ecosystem, we can see there are a lot of tech companies there. And one of the reasons being, of course, you have a very, very skilled labor force. I mean, 70% of the population has a higher tertiary education. Just think of that. That is a very huge number. Secondly, you have cheap labor costs. And the government is aware that it needs to create startups to create jobs for the country because the country is so far behind in the GDP PPP. That's the reason maybe why they came up with the initiative to get a digital state in the year 2019. That should help with many things, among which is the legal and governmental framework. Now, the legal and governmental framework in Ukraine is, from a Western European standpoint, pretty terrible. Yes, you have a government which is weak, I have to say. You have a legal frame set that is not on par with Western European standards, hence you get a lot of corruption going on. And Transparency International ranks the Ukraine on rank 122 of 180 countries they're measuring. The worst level I've ever seen in this series so far. Now, that already gives you an indication that doing business there might be a challenge for everyone. The next thing we would like to take a look at is the tax situation, because taxes have to be paid always, but is there any good exemption for a startup? Now, it turns out that as complicated as things are in the Ukraine, there is a specific tax exemption that I would like to mention to you, which is for IT technology startups. Here you have a VAT tax exemption until the 1st of January 2023, which might be prolonged from that day on. Maybe that is one of the reasons why you see so many IT startups in the country. Now, the next thing we would like to understand is, are there any popular Ukrainian brands? Because if they are, we know we can grow a world-known business in this country. And I was looking at the traditional brands and none of them meant anything to me. Okay, now I'm a Western European guy, hence many of those brands I've never heard of most likely are relevant to the eastern part of Europe. I mean, they're not small by any means, but they're not what I would call world known. I mean, you can't go to America and ask, have you heard of that brand? Things change, however, if you look at the startups, because some of the startups, from my perspective, have made it to world known brands. One that would I name is Grammarly. Now, I'm using this program myself. which is an add-on to Word or your browser. It's an extension that will help you with the grammatics and spelling in the English language. I wasn't aware that it is Ukrainian, to be honest. Then there is GitLab, which is a platform where developers meet, and it is used by big companies, multinational like Siemens, like the European Space Agency. I mean, this is a world startup now, and it is bridging the know-how that is in the Ukraine and the desire for a, let's say, cost-efficient production of IT, which already gives you then the idea that what type of industries are big in terms of the startups ecosystem. It is very, very deep tech heavy and fintech heavy. A lot of blockchain technology is also deriving from the Ukraine. And you will find world-class programmers in the country. I can also say that there are good service providers in the country for medical devices, for clinical testings. That I know from personal experience. So you get everything in this country. Just have to deal with this, let's say, not always easy surroundings in the country. So the next question you might have is, okay, it sounds interesting, but is there a startup visa to the Ukraine? Because otherwise I won't be able to start my business there. Let's be frank, there is no startup visa. Even though they're stressing out their support for startups, etc., there is no specific startup visa. The visas for the Ukraine are pretty simple. There are 3 different types of short-term, mid-term, and long-term stay. The long-term visa, which would be the equivalent of a residency in the Ukraine, actually allows you to work in the country. But then you would have, of course, to register your company first and do fulfill a lot of other requirements, where you can take a look at the list in the links down below. So the final question, is the Ukraine a good place to start your business? Honestly, it depends. If you are great at IT and you're able to speak the Russian language, most likely this is the perfect place for you to start, because you got low wages, you got a very good connection to the Western Europes, and you have the workforce to support you to grow your company fast. It might not be if you're troubling with corruption, if you are afraid of the war that is around the doorstep, or at least the uncertainty of that whole situation, the political instability, and if you feel that the Ukraine isn't redirected or directly at the European market that you're aiming at. All right, everybody, I hope that short video was helpful to you. If you ever started a business in Ukraine, just let me know in the comment section. Also, share your experience with others. I thank you for watching this video. If you made it so far, please subscribe and push the notification bell, because it really, really helps this channel to grow. Thank you, and I'm gonna see you next time.